Okay, so we are starting, and I'm not sure if we learn all of Siman Shin Zayin 307 in Hilchot Shabbat, but that Siman talks about talking on Shabbat, as the title of it is Halakhot of Shabbat, which depend on talking. And the Shulchan Aruch starts from a quote that many of us say on Kiddush, V'daber davar. I think we mentioned that last time we learned with the pasuk from Yeshayahu, Im tashiv mishvat raglecha, asat chapasecha yom kodshi. And we have the pasuk v'daber davar. What is the daber davar? Talk something. So there's some kind of restrictions in talking on Shabbat, even if it's not any creation and there's no melacha. There's something we don't talk on Shabbat. What does it mean? שלא יהיה דיבורך של שבת כדיבורך של חול. That what we say on Shabbat should be different than what we say, what we talk on the regular weekdays. It changes the atmosphere of Shabbat. Therefore, says the Shulchan Aruch, one shouldn't say, I'll do this thing tomorrow, or I'll buy this thing tomorrow, and which is on Yom Chol. We don't talk on Shabbat about things that we can't do on Shabbat. So we don't buy things on Shabbat. So we also don't talk about buying things on Shabbat. I think we mentioned last week that if it's a kind of need of a mitzvah or something like that, so we can talk about it on Shabbat, but it creates a whole different atmosphere in shul, in the park. When you talk about things which are more holy, more between people, so it creates a whole different atmosphere. And says the Shulchan Aruch, even dvarim betelim, things of nonsense, of no meaning, one shouldn't talk about too much on Shabbat. And that brings a question for many of us. Okay, so what do you do on Shabbat? What do you do on Shabbat? Well, we can't talk about business, and even things of nonsense, politics or soccer, we shouldn't talk about it too much. So what do we talk about on Shabbat? What will be the simple answer? Torah. One should learn more Torah. Says the Rama. So that's obviously one should learn more Torah on Shabbat. That's quite honest. Says the Rama. Things that people sometimes enjoy talking on Shabbat. Some people enjoy the schmoozing. That's the Onik Shabbat. Some people in some places, some shuls, even they enjoy the schmoozing in shul. I heard one of the shuls. I never checked it with Rav Nata Greenblatt. I never checked it with his son after he passed away. But I heard that one of the shuls, he very much pushed the people in the shul to open a Kiddush club. He to open a Kiddush club. What's a Kiddush club? They go out, they leave while the Haftarah or while the Dvar Torah of the rabbi, and the rabbi sometimes can speak for 10, 15, 20 minutes. With the Haftarah, it could be easily 20 minutes. And they do Kiddush outside of the shul, or in the lobby of the shul or somewhere, on whiskey, which that could be a problem. Better to do on wine. I think we mentioned that in the past. And the schmooze for 20 minutes. And I think I have to ask his son, but I think he wanted people to do it. But that's in the States, because not in that specifically community, not everyone came to shul. Who said you come to shul? Why not stay at home and watch the football? I'm not sure if it's football on Shabbat, but not everyone was Shomer Shabbat. So if you come to shul, so at least for the hour or two or three a person is in shul, he's not on the TV, he's not on the cell phone. So okay, so he won't stay in shul the whole time. And if he stays in shul, he'll talk the whole time. So it's better for him to come to shul and to go to a Kiddush club and have a shot of whiskey and a few cookies, and then he'll be part of the community. So I have to check it once with Rav Rata's son, if that's true that he opened a Kiddush club. You can say one of the Gdolim in the States, he opened a Kiddush club. Obviously, we should do it also, but that's the reason why he did it. Anyway, says the Rama, that people who enjoy talking, for them, that's the Onik Shabbat. That's the joy of Shabbat. Schmoozing, talking about things, talking about politics in the olden times. If you read the olden books, so like David Copperfield and so on, after you have the meal, so the men go to a room and smoke together and talk about politics. That's the enjoyment. That's what they do. So if one enjoys, he's allowed to do it on Shabbat. But says Rama, interesting halacha. If I don't enjoy it, okay, I do not enjoy it, I prefer to learn. I shouldn't say different news and talk about politics to make my friend happy. I should learn Torah. Okay, so however, the Mishnah Berurah says in any case, one shouldn't spend too much time on Shabbat talking about things which don't have any meaning to it. It's and he said that someone who keeps himself refrains from talking on Shabbat on divrei chov, things which aren't holy, so he'll be called holy. So on Shabbat, it should be a day where even our words, we keep our words. Once in the army, one of the non-religious guys cursed, and his friend of him, also non-religious, said, "How can you curse? It's Shabbat. You can't." So we don't curse for the whole week, right? But on Shabbat, as we saw here, the language should be different, right? The language should be different. I'm skipping some of the halachot here, because some of the halachot here talk about asking a non-Jewish person to do something. And hopefully we'll have a different class, perhaps next week. Next week should be fine, about things we ask non-Jews. And if we have time, we'll discuss it today. But just want to talk about talking on Shabbat. I think that's got to do with talking. So we'll set aside the asking a non-Jewish person to do something.
If I want to say Kiddush clubs, almost every shul, modern Orthodox shuls, they all have Kiddush clubs.
They will not have.
They all have.
They all have Kiddush clubs. Right.
The rabbi's against it, but they do
it anyway.
So
that's an example. Why are they against it? Because people go out of the shul and leave the shul. Sometimes there's a benefit. Depends where.
Right.
Depends where. Like we just saw now. On Shabbat, we shouldn't talk about politics, but if someone really enjoys it, and that's his joy in Shabbat, so for him it's permitted. Same as we said about talking, and we mentioned it a bit last time we learned, one shouldn't do calculations. I bought this clothes, that cost me 50 shekels, and that cost me 100 shekels. Calculations of a business, we leave it for the weekdays. On Shabbat, which we can do, at least for a Jew, we can hint for people. Let's say we need a worker. So you shouldn't say to someone, please come to my house this evening, Motzei Shabbat, I need a plumber, okay? Or I need someone to help me carry or fix up something. So we don't ask him, but we're allowed to hint. And you can ask, do you think on Motzei Shabbat you'll be able to hop by my house? And he knows, 1 second, why does he want me to hop by his house? Obviously, he needs me to fix the power supply. But we can ask it as a hint. And the reason why we can do this as a hint, because on Shabbat, it's not forbidden. It doesn't say in the Torah, it says, Lo tevaru esh bechol moshvotechem. You shouldn't light fire wherever you live, right? It doesn't say in the Torah, you shouldn't talk about business wherever you live, right? The whole idea of what we say on Shabbat, what we don't say on Shabbat, is to keep the atmosphere of Shabbat. But as soon as I change my words and I hint to my friend, I know, okay, I'm giving a hint, and that's it. I still keep the idea of Shabbat and in my mind.
The story about how in the shul the rabbi enforced no talking. And then a guy comes to him and says, I'm not making any money. I used to go to shul and talk to my neighbors. And
that's how you make the money by talking. Okay. There's another thing is we are allowed to talk on Shabbat, and we mentioned it a bit beforehand. We hinted to it beforehand. If theoretically could do that thing on Shabbat, even if actual practice I can't do it on Shabbat, but if theoretically I can do it on Shabbat and will be permitted to do it on Shabbat, I'm allowed to talk about it on Shabbat. And I'll give an example. Theoretically, we can walk to Jerusalem on Shabbat. Well, how do you walk through? There's houses all along the way, right? If you go by Azariah, so the houses all along the way, and you can walk to Jerusalem on Shabbat, right? So I can ask my friend, would you want to walk with me to Jerusalem after Shabbat? That's far away. So theoretically, I could do that on Shabbat, right? Because theoretically I can do it on Shabbat, so I can also speak about it on Shabbat. But if it's I can't do it even theoretically on Shabbat. Do you want to drive with me tomorrow to Jerusalem? You aren't allowed to drive on Shabbat. So also you shouldn't ask a friend about driving together for Shabbat. Or you could say to a friend in shul, I'll speak to you tomorrow. Can you speak to him on Shabbat? Yes. When you speak to him tomorrow, he'll be at work, you'll be at work, you'll be in a distance of 100 kilometers from each other. Obviously, you'll be using a cell phone or your phone to call him on Sunday. But theoretically, you can speak to him on Shabbat without calling him, right? So you can also say to him, you don't say to him, give you a call tomorrow. I'll speak to you tomorrow. Okay, so the terms we use, because we use terms which are more Shabbat oriented, we keep the atmosphere of Shabbat. As we mentioned, it doesn't say in the Torah, don't talk on Shabbat. Just make sure your words of Shabbat keep the atmosphere of Shabbat. And that's why there's the difference between what we say. Okay, there's an interesting halacha here, which brings here a few questions. I'm trying to think. What's the time now? We have time to call about them. Maybe I'll skip a bit, and then a question I have many times. Okay, a question I have not hundreds of times, but I have many times, especially as a teacher. Can students learn history on Shabbat? They're learning for a test. You're allowed to learn history on Shabbat for a test. You're allowed to read a novel on Shabbat. Is there a difference between reading fiction, Harry Potter, learning history on Shabbat? So are you allowed to do it? סדר שולחן ערוך, I'm read it inside. אסור ללמוד בשבת ביום טוב זולת בדברי חוכמה. The only thing you're allowed to learn on Shabbat and Yom Tov are divrei Torah, words of Torah. So the only thing we learn on Shabbat and Yom Tov are the words of Torah. Let's continue. ואפילו בספרי חוכמות אסור. Even in books of wisdom, we aren't allowed to read on Shabbat. That's the first opinion. And then says the Shulchan Aruch, ויש מי שמתיר. Some hold it is permitted, ועל פי סברתו מותר להביט באצטרוליו בשבת, אצטרלו בשבת, אצטרלו is something to measure stars, or people who look at stars that they use it. So some people say that you're allowed to look at things of wisdom on Shabbat, and says the Shulchan Aruch, that is the minhag to say you're allowed to learn other things on Shabbat, not just Torah. But he says, Yireh Shamayim, someone who has Yireh Shamayim, who should be machmir on it. Okay, so what's the right thing to do? And here we bring it as some kind of mitzvah in it. So I think you can do it on Shabbat, of learning other things. If there's no mitzvah at all in it, so one should try not to do it on Shabbat. And I'll give an example. If now you read a book of wisdom of how to become a better person, okay, how to communicate better, it's not Torah, but obviously there's some kind of mitzvah in it of how to use your phone in a better way that doesn't overtake all of our lives, how to communicate better with the family, with friends. That has some kind of mitzvah in it, right? Derech Eretz, so that we can be somewhere on the makels and read it on Shabbat. But now to learn Socrates or Aristotle, there's no mitzvah in learning his words, and that we should refrain from on Shabbat. For students, sometimes we say there's a mitzvah of the parents to make sure that the children can get a job. And so they need to learn, they need to study. So we say to them, it's better not to learn on Shabbat for your tests, for your exams. Learn for it on Friday, learn on Motzei Shabbat. But if for some reason you feel very stressed, so you can also learn it on Shabbat, it's better to refrain, as we said. But if someone needs, he can do it on Shabbat.
If you have a test in Torah on Sunday, can you learn on Shabbat?
So Torah is Torah. Torah is, even if it's lo lishma, mitoch shelo lishma, the test brings it. I said, do you go to the SCP? SCP, Smichat Chaver program.
Yes.
Yeah. So the Smichas Chaver program, they have a test, right? Why do they have a test?
Help you learn more.
To help you learn better, right? So if I have an exam in Torah, I want to learn Torah, and I know how will I learn better if I have a test at the end of the semester, and I'm forced to learn. And people who learn Torah many times will say, "Yes, I want the test. Why do I want the test? Because that will push me to learn better." So obviously, you can learn for the test on Shabbat. The whole reason you have a test is to be part of the mitzvah of learning Torah. So yes, you can learn for an SCP test on Shabbat. You can press the SCP test on Shabbat. I had the question once when I was learning the halakhot of avelut. I asked my Rosh Yeshiva, I said to him, look, and there's an exam, and I learned it around the 3 weeks. Okay, so I learned it around the 3 weeks, and also a few weeks before, and then a few weeks afterwards. And I asked him, can I learn it on Shabbat? On one hand, okay, it's Torah, so although we prefer not to, it doesn't come into practice, but in the end, I enjoy learning Torah, so are you allowed to learn it on Shabbat? So I said, yes. Are you allowed to learn it on Tisha B'Av? Yes. So you have here something which is, on one hand, you can learn on Tisha B'Av because it doesn't maybe excite us as learning about Shabbat, as learning about maybe different people who learn about Metzia, Vakama, all the Masechtot of between people, and negotiation, and different Reb Chaim and the Rambam. But in the end, it's Torah, so we can get joy from it. But we can even learn it on Tisha B'Av as halachot. But that's the answer he gave me. Yes, you can learn it on Shabbat, even although it's halachot of avelut, because of mourning, because it's Torah. Okay, so as I said, I'm skipping parts of this siman. Hopefully we'll get to it next week, because we have also in the beginning and also in the end a few halachot which have got to do with non-Jewish people. What can I ask a non-Jewish person on Shabbat? Can I hint a non-Jewish person on Shabbat? Hopefully if I remember, and if I forget, remind me, and we'll get to it next week. Okay, so next week, B'ezras Hashem. What can we do? And that's a very interesting question. We have the Mishnah Berurah. It's not so clear. What can we do? What can't we do? When does Shabbat begin? So Shabbat begins sunset, right? But really the nighttime begins. When does the nighttime begin? Seder Kochavim. When does Shabbat end? Seder Kochavim. We have the time between sunset and Seder Kochavim, or somewhere in between them, that it's called Ben Hashmashot. And they say in Yiddish, nishtahin, nishtaher. It's not day, not night, also day, also night. It's something in between. Or it's a question, what is it? Daytime or nighttime? We have that question for Brit. If a baby boy is born right at sunset. So when do you do the Brit? 8th day, 9th, when do you count the days? So we have Machoket Poskim, if 13 and a half minutes, 7 minutes, we won't go into all, but between sunset and when the stars go out, that it's a question of what day is it exactly. Obviously, on the time after sunset, we don't do any of the malachot which are forbidden midoraita, and we can't do any of the malachot which are forbidden midoraita. Can we do something which is forbidden only midrabanan? It's a rabbinical decree. So on one hand, you'll say it's Shabbat, right? It's Shabbat, so obviously I can't do it, right? Because it's Shabbat. On the other hand, if you look at it's something in between. It's not day. It's half Friday, half Shabbat. What's the status of that time, right? So that's a question. Says the Shulchan Aruch. I'll read the Shulchan Aruch. Kol shvut de Rabbanan. Any decree of the Rabbanan, which shvut from the Rabbanan, which is rabbinical. Mutar ben hashmashot. One is allowed to do it ben hashmashot, between sunset and when the stars come out. But letzorech mitzvah. So not everything, only if it is shvut rabbanan, it's rabbinical, and in the times of ben hashmashot, and if it is for a mitzvah. And he gives an example. כגון, לומר לאינו יהודי להדליק לו נר בין השמשות. If it's dark in his house and having lights on Shabbat in the house, it's a tzorech mitzvah. We need to have light on Shabbat. It's only Shabbat. We need to see what we're doing. So if I forgot to turn on the light of Shabbat, I can ask a non-Jewish person while it's still ben hashmashot to turn on a light for me So it's, let's say, a few minutes before the stars come out. I can do something which is Isur d'Rabbanan, it's rabbinical, and has some kind of mitzvah in it. Right? Asking a non-Jewish person is rabbinical. It's rabbinical. Ben hashmashot, for need of a mitzvah, I can do it. Okay, so that's a halacha which many times we might find. Okay, we might find. I want to read the Mishnah Berurah here. No, he doesn't bring here, but the Mishnah Berurah, I'm not sure here or different. Siman has quite a long discussion about it. What can you do? What happens if you accept Shabbat? You don't accept Shabbat. The Mishnah Berurah, it's not so clear, or maybe it is clear. If one accepted Shabbat already, or the community accepted Shabbat already, so it says you can't do it. Although maybe from the Shulchan Aruch, it says that even after you accepted Shabbat, okay, it's still, even when I accept Shabbat, I'll ask objective, is it Shabbat? I started Shabbat early. Okay, I started Shabbat early. Is it now really Shabbat? Well, for me, it's Shabbat, because I set upon myself Shabbat. But if you look at the world around us, is it now Shabbat? For me, it's Shabbat. For other people, it's not Shabbat. So maybe I can ask a non-Jewish person. If one accepted Shabbat early and his friend did not accept Shabbat, I can ask, if I accepted Shabbat early, my friend didn't, I can ask my friend, please do for me something on Shabbat. Please turn on the light for me. Because for him, it's not Shabbat, right? Or if on Motzei Shabbat ended 5 minutes ago, and I prefer to keep Rabbeinu Tam, and I sing my Shlit songs at home, and I'll take out Shabbat in an hour, only in an hour. But then I realized that, I don't know, I need to put something in the oven for my son so he'll have food. I don't want to do it because for me it's still Shabbat. I want to have still Shabbat. I can ask my Jewish friend that he already did Havdalah, please turn on the oven for my son. Stick the chicken inside, right? Because for him it's still not Shabbat. So a bit similar to that halacha, since it's still ben hashmashot, it's somewhere in between. It's not really Shabbat, it's not really Friday, and it's a fake, it's a question. And doing an Isur d'Rabbanan, something which is only rabbinical, we can do it on Shabbat if there's a need of a mitzvah. Maybe, perhaps, I wouldn't go so extreme on it, but perhaps most of the lights for most of the poskim, the lights we have today, are d'Rabbanan. According to most poskim, most of the electricity we have today is rabbinical. I come to shul, and Shkia was just 2 minutes ago, and then we realized that we forgot to turn on the lights in shul. What do? There's no non-Jewish person around us. If there's a non-Jewish person around us, call a non-Jewish person. That's the easiest, but there's no everyone here is Jewish. So there's no Filipinos here. What do? So according to the Shulchan Aruch, you can do it on Shabbat. It's rabbinical, and it's still in the time of Ben hashmashot. So you can do it on Shabbat if there's a need of a mitzvah. If there's a need of a mitzvah, the Mishnah, if you read the Mishnah on the night of Shabbat, b'mei madlikim, sometimes if one needs to, you can take Trumot Masrot. On that time, probably none of us met it today, but if one said, oh, I forgot to take Trumot Masrot, on that time he can take, if I forgot to do it. But there's different examples that we can be a bit more makel, can be a bit more lenient on the time between sunset and when the stars come out, or a few minutes after sunset. Okay, so that's and I think we have another moment. Let's see if we have a short halacha which doesn't talk about non-Jewish people, because that we'll talk about next week. it's a long topic, so we'll just mention it just in highlights. What can we read on Shabbat? Okay, so we mentioned that we shouldn't read, can read books of wisdom and learn. That we mentioned. What about learning or just reading novels? Reading novels. So Shulchan Aruch here discusses about reading different kind of novels. He discusses reading novels which probably were not so clean, okay, not so clean. And he says you aren't allowed to read them on Shabbat, and even on the weekdays you aren't allowed to read those kinds of novels. He brings there different examples, which I'm not sure what they are. We know, but there were known novels on those times that he says people who read it, it's Moshav Letzim, Al Tifnun Halelim. He removes his God from his mind, reading those books. And Yetzirah, and he says you aren't allowed to copy them, you aren't allowed to read them. And so that's about different books of novels. One interesting halacha, and we'll end with that. We mentioned about talking about different things, saying different stories. Says the Rama, maybe perhaps that's forbidden only if it is not in Hebrew. But if it is in Hebrew, says the Rama, that it might be permitted. Okay, it looks like it will be permitted, and the meaning is to be makel. And just we'll end it from here. We won't have enough time to continue with it. It might be a mitzvah, learning Torah, or a mitzvah aseh of learning Hebrew. So for this shiur in English, we'll conclude with the idea that learning in Hebrew has an aspect of it in mitzvah. Just something to know.
I think that